Namaste and greetings. I am Mahima Kapoor, researcher and assistant editor at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav एवं नीति अनुसंधान संस्थान नई दिल्ली. Welcome you all to the IMPRI #Web Policy Talk. Images from the migrant exodus in March 2020 remain etched in our minds and have reignited the discourse towards planned, organized, and sustainable urbanization and urban governance. In that light, we have gathered for talk on governing cities, the missing links by Professor Amita Bhide under the series, The State of Cities, #City Conversations. This deliberation is being organized by the IMPRI Center for Habitat, Urban and Regional Studies. I feel honored to introduce the moderator, Dr. Soumyadip Chattopadhyay. Sir is an associate professor, Visva-Bharati, Santiniketan, and a visiting senior fellow at IMPRI, New Delhi. Welcome, sir. I feel privileged to introduce the speaker, Professor Amita Bhide. Ma'am is currently a dean and professor in the School of Habitat Studies, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. She has been deeply involved in studying issues related to urban poor communities, community organization and housing rights movements, and advocacy groups. Her recent work at the school has been on issues of urban development, in particular, those concerning urban transformations and their link to inclusive and sustainable development. She has extensively researched urban local governance and planning, water and sanitation, housing, and land issues. She attempts to develop a theoretical and action model of urbanization that is relevant for the global south through an engagement with several transformative groups at the city, provincial, and national scales. Her recent publications include Informal Settlements, the Emerging Response to COVID, and the Imperative of Changing the Narrative, Everyday Violence, Everyday Life, and Bottom-Up Peace-Building Initiatives by Urban Poor in Mumbai, and Colonizing the Slum. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Mahima, and thanks to IMPRI for hosting this talk. I really look forward to this talk in some ways, which is really like an experiment in the making.
Ma'am, if I could, apologies for interrupting. If I could also introduce the panelists,
sure,
the discussants.
Go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am. We are fortunate to have Mr. Vinay Baindur, Mr. Mathew Idiculla, and Mr. Unhale as discussants for the session. Mr. Vinay is a researcher and activist focusing on urban reforms, governance, water reforms, and policy. Welcome, sir. Mr. Mathew is an independent legal and policy consultant and visiting faculty, School of Policy and Governance, Azim Premji University, Bengaluru. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Sameer is the Joint Commissioner, Department of Municipal Administration, Government of Maharashtra. Welcome, sir. Now I invite Dr. Chattopadhyay to take the proceedings further, and we look forward to learning from our esteemed gathering. Thank you.
I think sir's connection just worked out. So let me invite Amita ma'am for her lecture, but I think Soumyadip sir is connected. Can you hear us, Soumyadip sir? Yes, Soumyadip sir, can you hear us? Okay, let me invite Professor Bhide to start with her lecture.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, please go ahead, Soumyadip sir.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Sorry, because I just some internet issues because I am joining today from Santiniketan. So anyway, namaskar and good evening to all of you on behalf of Center for the Habitat Region, Urban and Regional Studies at IMPRI. I welcome all this city conversation series. And today's topic is very interesting because we know that the municipal government in India have found to be historically weak in nature, and serious infrastructural deficits and basic service delivery gaps make these cities uninhabitable and also undermine their potential as engines of economic growth. And we have experimented with decentralization to improve government performances through local accountability, improvement in local accountability. And also a series of urban reforms have been initiated to enhance the financial autonomy of the municipalities. There has been emphasis on private of the urban services through public-private partnership, urban development programs like JNN, URM, and Smart Cities Mission. They have made the allocation of grants conditional on adhering to a set of financial and governance reforms, incorporating these concepts. And also the neighborhood associations, the resident welfare associations, the CBOs, NGOs, they have emerged as the new actors in governance arrangements, and they have been included to promote greater efficiency in the functioning of the institutions of governance. So essentially, urban governance in India includes a whole range of actors and institutions with different mandates, different abilities, even different visions for cities. Now, disparate formal and informal processes and mechanism of governance coexist. Now, all these changes a complex form of governance in ways it is developed, and the Indian cities are governed through those formal and informal processes and mechanisms, and quite naturally much deeper evaluations in terms of their wider implications for urban development are required. And today we are fortunate to have with us Professor Amita Bhide and also Mr. Vinay Baindur, Mr. Unhale, and Dr. Mathew Idiculla to sort of deep dive into these complexities of governing cities in India. So with this, let me formally invite Professor Amita Bhide to give her presentation, to give her lecture. So it's over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Chattopadhyay, and thanks to IMPRI for hosting this talk. Actually, the purpose of this talk is really a provocation. And I think we have been lamenting the non-implementation of the 74th Constitutional Amendment for a very long time. And I think that over the last 30 odd years, roughly, of the passage of the 74th Constitutional Amendment, there is much water which has flown under the bridge. And therefore, we need to actually address many of the contemporary complexities which have been added to the governing of cities. And from that point of view, therefore, thinking about various dimensions of change in urban governance. In so doing, I want to also locate the 74th Constitutional Amendment in the wider context of emerging patterns of urbanization and what it means to govern cities. We'll go to the next slide straight away. Okay, so as I said, this is something which is really, I feel that contemporary municipal governments or city governments are really seen. On one hand, one is constantly talking about this non-implementation of the 74th CAA. But on the other hand, there are many other changes which are happening on the urban governance template. And city governments are really reeling under those conflicting sometimes pressures, multiple pressures. And we are also talking of a governance where there are new issues which are emerging, and many a times the links between the old and the new, and even within the new, between the higher and the lower, and the actual state of institutions to issues which are outside are often not made. So I hope to perhaps at least bring about these missing links for the purpose of this August audience, and hopefully we should take it up from there. Next slide, please. So the 74th constitutional amendment, I don't think I have to reiterate the promise which was made by this 74th CA. The purpose of this slide is to not reiterate all the content of the 74th CA, but really in terms of what it assured us. So one, that it was an assurance of a more democratic and representative governance, especially for urban governments, which had to be rescued from a colonial legacy of being restricted to only the ratepayers or official citizenry of the cities, and to take them towards more democratic governance, which would be responsive to all sections of who lived in a city. The second promise, which is also very, very critical, is basically the promise of devolution and empowered and proximate government. Its institution of ward committees, its introduction of the principle of bringing representatives of non-governmental organizations and civil society organizations into governance also promise to change the texture of governance and bring it more closer to people. Because otherwise, till then, we have only been obsessed with Gram Sabhas and decentralization in rural areas, but never about what happens in cities. The third thing is that the 74th CA tried to bring in new agendas into urban local governance, especially on the inclusion side and also on environmental consciousness. I will again, as I said, not get into the details of all of this. And in short, it really tried to create a third tier of government in cities and towns. Next, please. But already, I mean, the 74th CAA was passed in 1993, 1992, and then states passed it by 93, 94. Already in the next 10 years, one sees that changes in the script of 74th CA started happening. So on one hand, outwardly, the JNNURM made the implementation of 74th CA as a conditionality. Okay? But I'm going to argue basically that 74th CA also added and modified the script of governance which was given by the 74th CA. Two examples here are in terms of looking at the community participation law, its envisagement of area sabhas, and what was to be done by area sabhas, which is a completely different model of participation rather than the one which was seen by the 74th constitutional amendment. The public disclosure law, which talked about disclosures of financial and other performance documents, insisting on a transparency, something which one can see as conducive to participation in a voluntary kind of way, but only technically in some ways, right? Because as some of my friends, even in the economics department of the Mumbai Municipal Corporation like to say, it is one thing to keep the Mumbai Municipal Corporation budget in the public domain, but even as economists, they have not been able to decipher what the Mumbai Municipal Corporation budget really means. So that's another thing altogether. The 74th CA also disrupted the overall script of the 74th CA by creating a very different model of financing and project financing, also based on debt financing, introducing also a way in which city governments were pushed into a distinct relationship with state governments and the central government, which was full of reforms, their conditionalities, overall directionality which was given by the state governments. And in some ways, it also strengthened the role for consultants who had by then started creeping into the overall machinery of municipal agencies. Next. Now, if 74th Amendment brought in these changes, we see that smart cities, even though it is a program meant for only 100 cities in the country, also added another script, another deviation into the overall script of governance. And this is something which is also then happening in the cities which are not part of smart cities, but slowly also changing. So number one, again, as has now become the practice, every urban mission or every urban program begins with this lip service which is given to 74th CAA has to be implemented. So smart cities also begins with that. Okay, but at the same time, it begins to also undermine it. In fact, it creates a special purpose vehicle for city governance, even as part of the smart city. So if one is talking about democracy, citizen-linked participation, the SPV is like a corporatized model of governance, which takes things into really like the chartered governments which were tried with in Canada at one point in time. So it's a different model of governance. And clearly it led to the tussles between the political and the corporate forms in many different places, including in Maharashtra, for example, where some cities initially rejected being part of smart cities. Then the political wing also tried to insinuate itself within the SPV. And even now in municipal corporations like the Thane municipal corporations, one is seeing an ongoing tussle between the political wing and the SPV and Thane. The smart city mission has further entrenched the role of consultants who are now very much into the mainstream of city governance in several places. So in not just as part of advisors and the preparation of projects, but also now as people who could execute, who hold a very important links to city governance in the form of data management. They are the ones who are often operating and creating the command and control centers, and very, very important continuities of projects which are all being done by consultants. So the consultant regime in many ways is fully entrenched into the municipal institution which is contemporary. Next, please. And we look at Swachh Bharat, which introduces another very qualitative change into the texture and quality of governance which is happening at the city level. At one level, Swachh Bharat is really an extension of the Jhadu Pocha functioning of the municipal institutions. But on the other hand, what it does is that the manner in which Swachhata is assessed is something which is very different, because now there are these survections, the city surveys, in which citizen opinion polls are being conducted in order to rank cities. Even the overall mechanism of ranking, which was initiated by JNNURM in a very, very small manner. And at that time, the ranking was more on credit ranking. But here now, cities are being ranked on a variety of indices. And one should keep in mind how cleanest cities are being seen, how the livability city index is being created, the management of these surveys, creating new kinds of reports. All of this is again giving a qualitative change to the nature of expectations and the style of governance, which has now become much more mediated. How does one become media savvy? How does one present reports? How does one gloss over data and create data in some ways. Next, please. Okay. So with this now, I will go to also examination, just as we have examined till now, how government policy itself has actually paid only lip service to all the tenets of the 74th constitutional amendment. There are some agendas which I think were well instituted by the 74th constitutional amendment. Like one of the successes that we all recognize is that of regular elections, one, mostly, more or less regular, I should say, in most of the states. A creation of a uniform template of urban governance and their nomenclatures and where they should be instituted. A third is in terms of giving representation to several vulnerable sections. And the most important of these, I would say, is of engendering governance, because several municipal institutions did have provisions for the reservation of scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, but very few, or they only had like nominated women members. But on the other hand, the 74th constitutional amendment talked about 33% reservation for women in all reservations and across even leadership positions, and mandatory reservation also in all the important decision-making committees of the municipal institutions. So interestingly, the story of engendering has been moved forward in some ways by several states. So today, about 14 states in India have 50% reservation. So they have gone beyond the 33% reservation, which was mandated by the 74th constitutional amendment. But on the other hand, there are also states which have simultaneously instituted practices which also generate barriers for women representatives. So for example, in Maharashtra, in all urban local bodies except Mumbai, there is a parallel initiation of a system of multi-member wards. Okay? And it is our hypothesis, I would say, just now more born out of observation rather than a very deep study, which one of my PhD students is also engaging with. But our hypothesis and our observation is really that a system of multi-member wards discourages independent women members from participating in municipal elections and instead encourages dynastic politics and women representatives to come up only through their affiliations, or rather I would say biological affiliations or relational affiliations with political dynasties, husbands, father-in-laws, daughter, son, kind of things. So this is something which one needs to think of as what are we doing even with the structures of representation, not just talk about ward committees and so on. Next. So the story of representation and participation, I see Mathew here, also Katyayani. So I really hope for also feedback here. Okay? And I think that representation, participation has been given extremely new twists by several contemporary developments, and these require much deeper thoughts, right? So at one level, when it comes to ward committees, even now, we still face issues of institution of ward committees in all the cities in which they were supposed to be established, all cities above 3 lakh, etc. There are issues again in several states about who is actually inducted in the name of non-governmental members and what is the genuinity of that representation. The conduct of meetings of ward committees is again another aspect. And the fourth issue, which is also emerging, is also the politicization of the forum, and whether, I think most importantly, raising also the issue of whether ward committees are only supposed to get a share of the governance, saying that you can pass proposals up to so and so, and whereas not be involved in the larger conduct of affair. That is a completely missing link. Is the ward budget prepared through a consultation with the ward committees and goes with their recommendation to the standing committee and the general body of the municipal institution? A question to be asked. Area sabhas, which were introduced by the JNNURM, we have 12 states which passed the legislation because it was again a conditionality to the to availing of the JNNURM funds. But only 2 states have formed the rules for area sabhas. And of course, the actual conduct of area sabhas remains another story altogether. Whether area sabhas, if properly instituted, would actually be participatory in nature, that would be a separate question. I'm not even going there. Okay? So at one level, one sees that state governments overall, there has been a tremendous resistance to instituting participation practices. But on the other hand, there are other things and other participatory practices which have moved ahead. And what are these? And that is something that we have to carefully see. So for example, to be selected as a smart city, one of the very important parameters for selection was supposed to be the weightage which was given to participation. Participation and consultation in the proposals for smart cities. But what was the form of that participation? If we start looking at the different practices of smart cities, one will come across things like essay competitions, drawing competitions, signature campaigns, polls, elocution competitions, hackathons, and so on and so forth. A very different form of participation, which is time specific, which is idea specific, which does not carry forth and has no other instituted significance thereafter. And there is no accountability which is linked to that participation. The second is the form of participation which is envisaged in the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. And that is again something which we already discussed, so I will not discuss it again. But my question is, are there as today participation being envisaged as a much more individual, opinion-based, mediated participation than a collective, engaged, deliberative form of participation? And whether that is something that bears thinking. Is this the second form of participation can be done and is managed also at a hands-off distance, usually by consultants who pool all of this together? So without the municipal institution being touched or dirtied in any way, very sanitized forms of participation. Next. We will now go to questions of functional domains. And here I think even the census 2011 itself shows us many new patterns and throws up new questions. So one is in terms of metro authorities. If we look at throughout the country today, there are about 59 different urban development authorities which have been created in the country. Now, these are all authorities which are created for overlapping functions, many functions which are also performed by municipal institutions, or there are shared functions which are also envisaged. Now, this is an important question as we are seeing in the census 2011, many extended urban developments. So you have city extensions or outgrowths, and there are sometimes urban developments which are going beyond the boundaries which are laid down for cities into perhaps neighboring states, neighboring cities, or neighboring villages, right? So therefore, these issues of regional or metro governance are going to become very critical. The 74th CA saw this more as a form of, again, having elected bodies and forming regional institutions. Again, something which has really not been implemented. What we have seen emerging within the country, and if one peruses the structures and the designs of these 59 different institutions, what do we see? That you have often multiple institutions for even the same or even similar kinds of functions. And most of these parastatals, even though they are operating in the same arena of the city, okay, they lack complete accountability to citizens. How does one make sense of this issue? How does one respond to these issues? What are the different models which are emerging in order to respond to this issue? One model is, of course, something that Mathew and other colleagues in Bangalore have experimented with, which is the form of the new legislation which they have been successful in instituting, and which is of making all parastatals in some ways accountable to the municipal institution. But would this model suffice where the overall city extensions also cover multiple states? Would this be successful when there is a different district which surrounds a city and there are two different district authorities which are also involved? So one needs to think through some of these issues. Or should one follow a Maharashtra model, which is, I think, very, again, thought-provoking or even critical to understand. Like in Mumbai as a city, today, there are at least 4 government institutions which have been given the powers of executing slum redevelopment projects. Okay? How accountability is generated through all of these? What is the convergence which is created in all of this over infrastructure, over resources? I think is another matter altogether. Leave alone also the question of democracy within these institutions. Next, please. Now, within functional domains, there are still other developments. 2 things that or rather 3 agendas which have emerged in the recent past. One is climate action plans, and which, if one looks at Niti Aayog documents, the kind of imperatives which are emerging, that the localization and having local climate action plans is extremely critical. Now, would municipal institutions be ideating, conceptualizing these plans? But environmental agencies are all at a state level or at a central level. There is, other than preparing the environmental status report, often you will have hardly any resources, capacities at the municipal level to even think of this. A similar ideational kind of a role is also seen for SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, which are also expected to be localized. How does one localize SDGs through municipal institutions whose ideational capacity we have not developed at all? And the third imperative, which is emerging in the form of what we saw very recently in the pandemic, where I think I'm drawing a very broad and maybe a provocative generalization, but I will see that most cities were unable to effectively cope with the pandemic. And it brought into question many other things, definitely the area of inclusion, but most importantly also the nature of health infrastructure, which is again a concurrent subject shared between the center, the state, and municipal authorities seem to have very little to do with health within the city. We also see in the functional domains that subsequent to the 74th constitutional amendment, there are many more inclusionary functions and which have been added to the municipal bodies without any change to the substance of municipal law. For example, there is a National Street Vendor Act, which was passed in 2014. But on the other hand, if we see and compare it with provisions in municipal law, this law coexists with the provisions in municipal law, which also treats street vendors as a nuisance. So on one hand, one is supposed to provide facilities and town vending zones as part of the street vending bill, conduct a participatory and form a town vending committee. But on the other hand, this coexists with also the raids, or what often many street vendors in Mumbai call as the chor gadis and the chor raids, which are conducted by the municipal institutions and calling them a nuisance. We also see that many of these inclusionary functions have, even prior to the 74th CA, but even post that, largely been contingent on schemes, usually centrally funded schemes. And within these centrally funded schemes, the delivery structures are never continuous. They have kept on shifting and changing. There is therefore even a discontinuity which is seen in delivery structures. And one sees that at a primary level, most cities, perhaps other than cities in Kerala, lack a primary level service delivery structure. It is a very, very big void, whether it is in the area of health, whether it is in the area of welfare or poverty redressal or anything. The complete absence of a primary level service delivery structure. In the municipal institutions, one will find cadres and primary level services structures which are well instituted for things like tax assessment and collection. One will find good service delivery structures or something which is instituted and which is now being reformed for waste management, etc., which have been right from the beginning core functions of the municipal institutions. But for all of these added on functions, there are no primary level structures which are in place and well instituted. And this brings us to a new question. Really, should municipal bodies be the implementing agencies in urban areas? If so, that requires a different kind of a conceptualization of resources, capacities, powers, or are they local democracies with freedom to set the agendas, to imagine agendas, and that requires a different kind of setup of resources, powers, and capacities. Next. The models of financing. I'll just raise two other issues and then I'm going to stop. So when it comes to financing, the overall model which was envisaged in the colonial period was really that you have a city or a municipal institution which comprises tax-paying citizens as the electorate and the municipal agencies which are the service providers. So there is a balance in this. Okay, this was, of course, disrupted by electoral democracy in the post-colonial period. In some ways, the 74th Constitutional Amendment and the JNURM tried to reinstate this kind of a model of tax-paying citizens, expanding the property tax, collections, etc., and accordingly strengthening the services by the municipal bodies. On the other hand, post that, we have had the GST, we have had the withdrawal of octroi. We also see the withdrawal or even shrinking of property tax, which is happening in several cities and in states. So Rajasthan has completely withdrawn the property tax. We also see, for example, Maharashtra, which has already declared a full concession and freedom from property taxes for all houses below 500 square feet in Mumbai. And this promises to now extend into all the neighboring cities in MMRDA and perhaps the rest of Maharashtra as well. So is there a new model that one is envisaging? Where, and if one looks at the record of SFCs, the State Finance Commission, then their ability to give non-tied incomes, guaranteed incomes, which will come in time to the municipal agencies, has also been very, very variable. So what does this mean? That municipal institutions are going to completely or depend more and more on state governments? Or will central finance commissions now give an independent provision to the urban local governments? And definitely, I think the financing model has a very clear relationship to the kind of institutional design. Would they be service delivery or implementing agency? Would they be local democracies with an agency and voice? Next. Another very frequently talked about issue, capacity nahi hai. Municipal institutions ke paas capacity nahi hai. Okay? But my question is, ye capacity kya bala hai? What is it? Capacity for? And I think there is a complete non-clarity about what is the capacity for. The assumption also is that they lack capacity, as in municipal institutions lack capacity, but capacity exists outside in the environment. So consultants have capacity. Do they? Parastatals have capacity. Do they? State government departments, which are supposed to be the higher levels of government, municipal administration, or what are called general administration departments, sometimes the urban development departments, mindless use and mindless GRs about what is happening to the ecology of the city. They have the capacity. How is capacity developed? A second issue, very important one, because to my mind, capacity really depends on clarity of role, powers, and responsibility. And it is often developed by doing things. Okay? It is not just a function of training and appointing another set of consultants to train. Okay? I think first, these initial issues of capacity for what? The capacity of higher level governments and associated ecologies, that needs to be developed along with the capacity of municipal institutions and a clarity of rules. Next. So if we look at the present state of municipal institutions, one is really seeing multiple templates which are in operation. One of corporatization, one of efficiency through which the previously existing structures are being hollowed out. A third of them as imaginating bodies setting new agendas. Another agenda, another template of them being institutions which do service delivery to the last mile. And actually functioning and existing agenda that we also see operating on ground is that municipal institutions often become the support base for parallel, informal, and land-based economies, which are existing in all our cities, large and small. And finally, also another unwritten agenda, which is also happening like this second last one, which is that municipal institutions actually generate resources for state institutions as cities become bigger and bigger. Not in a formal manner alone, but increasingly state institutions are dependent on cities. They draw revenues from these areas, but not actually empower the city governments for actually collecting and utilization of those revenues. So there is a design for disempowerment in some ways. Next. So is it possible to return to the 74th constitutional amendment, or is it impossible? We will engage with this question and in the last one or two slides max. Next, please. So many questions here. Okay, do we need a rethink on our template? What does proximity mean? What are the good scales and efficiency of service provision? Is the size of our particular different city governments, is that appropriate for that? Do we need multiple small city governments, something that Delhi has done? Does that, or one large one with 2 tiers within? How does one link some of these questions to taxation and revenue? How does one create a link to the institutions which have technical capacity? How many numbers of tiers to the local government? What should be the nature of local democracy? How is that linked to responsible governance, accountability structures? All of these dimensions, we really need to rethink and create a more cohesive template, which is taking into account contemporary realities. Next slide, please. So some things I think we have to just institute as important, and these are just thoughts, so one should really give a good feedback on all of this. The local democracy is definitely important, and proximacy is also necessary, and it is possible as well. But the connection of the proximate levels of governance needs to be clearly clarified to the institutional hierarchy. And I put down some questions there. One should also think of how there should be a clear space for participation in some of the regular processes of municipal decision making, whether it is in budgets, whether it is in critical decision making. How does one build the links to metro scale? We should definitely not have a rethink about reservations or regular elections, but we need to think about how does one make gendered representation or other forms of representation more effective. And the last slide, please. We clearly also need a primary service delivery structure which goes beyond the sanitation and engineering functions, which means for the softer infrastructure, health, education, welfare, but we don't have structures for that. And those structures are important, whether we envisage municipal institutions as service delivery institutions or local democratic institutions. There is also no doubt that we have never thought about mid-management. So we have these IS kind of categories, which is top-level management. But there has never been a thinking about what are the capacities required at a mid-level. How does recruitment happen there? How does categorization happen there? Especially from point of view of economy, environment, equity. How does one strengthen that? And finally, if one brings a stress on localization, then there have to be much more wider processes of how does one draw in from a broader economy and not just broader society, city society and resources, and not just rely on consultants. Thank you. I'm going to stop here.
So, thank you. I'm just thank you for your very interesting talk. Unfortunately, I missed some portion of your talk. So, but some of the ideas are really very interesting. Like you started with some of the promises of decentralization, establishing this empowered proximate government, and how does this 74 CAA facilitate some of the qualitative changes in the governance, and then some of the challenges that this 74th Constitutional Amendment Act and its implementation related issues that you have highlighted. And for example, you talked about the issues of localization of climate action plan and SDGs, and how far the local governments are in a position to to perform some of these tasks, because as we know that basically this decentralization stems from the principle of subsidiarity, but subsidiarity is not about devolving all the functions to the local government. Rather, it is better to think of some of the functions which can be best performed at the local level, and so on and so forth. But again, with this thing, let me now invite our discussion to carry forward these discussions. So let me first invite Dr. Mathew Idiculla to share your views or thoughts on this.
Hi everyone. You can hear me?
Okay. Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. So thanks for the invitation. Thanks IMPRI for the invitation, and thanks Amita for the talk. I mean, honestly, sort of speaking, I found it really engaging, and it pretty much gave a long and a sort of broad overview of all the kinds of issues that many of us have been interested in and have been engaging in on issues of urban governance. I mean, let me just summarize, just the key question that Amita has posed all of us. That is about how do we envision our, local governments? I mean, even the terminology itself is interesting because in the lexicon of the Indian state, it still continues to be ULBs. Not even using the term government. The ULB is a pre-74th Amendment term. So anyway, so let me just still use local government. So how do we envision our local governments? Do we envision them as service delivery or implementing agencies, or do we envision them as local democracies with the freedom to set its own agendas and its own vision? I think that sort of captures the core, aspects of Amita's talk, and I think in many ways these questions keep rising up. Obviously it came in the talk, but also in our discussions on questions around urban governance. So looking at the missing links, I mean, there are various ways to look at respond to what Amita has just said. I've taken copious notes. So let me just try to frame it in a particular way. So if you look at the missing links that Amita is speaking about, there is this what question. What are the missing links in our governance systems? There is the why question. Why do these missing links exist? There is the what ought to be question. Given these missing links and given the reasons why they exist, what ought to be done? And finally, if the what ought to be, how do you do it? If this is what ought to be done, how do we do it? So I think we can approach this in all these four ways. And Amita's talk is many ways laid down much of responses to much of these questions. On the what question, I really don't want to spend time because I think pretty much at least the panelists here, and I believe some of the attendees here, I think most of us are fairly familiar with the what question about what are the missing links that exist. 74th Amendment, lack of implementation, all of that. The why do these missing links persist is an interesting question to examine. Some of it already came in Amita's talk, but I might try to push it a bit more. And the last question last two questions, it's combined question about what ought to be is also something that I'd like to take up. On just the broad what question, there were a couple of interesting insights, and we can make connections with why the why question if we just reflect on it. Beyond the topics are often the stuff that we have worked on. So, but some new insights that I really found interesting is about the colonial, the antecedents of the colonial, governance continuing. So, interestingly, in colonial times, the city governments did exist, and some of our great freedom fighters were all municipal councillors, from Nehru, Patel, Bose. They were either mayors or councillors. So we have a system there. But it has, something that I think I missed on while analyzing is that the nature was a ratepayers or a taxpayers based. So one is, are we still, those antecedents continued post independence, or is it being revived, in the recent past with some of the tax based, and finance models? So that's one interesting question. The other is the very, the insightful observation that I found was about the nature of participation. I mean, there are many more, but I can't speak about all of them. The nature of participation, what kinds of participation is promoted and what kinds of participation is not promoted. And the very fascinating insight about how ward committees and all of them have been completely disempowered. Whereas for smart city proposals, certain types of participation, individual-based participation through mobile phones and opinion polls and all of that, versus collective and group-based participation. So I think these are interesting insights that we can reflect on, and hopefully, if we engage with these questions, fascinating insights should turn up. Just going back to some of the why questions, given all the missing links that we see. One of the questions is, we have been talking about these missing links, I don't know, for many years now. I mean, we have people here in this group who've been at it for more than 2 decades. But why do they persist? And I think this is a question that definitely cannot be answered by looking at the laws or policies or any of that. It is definitely a political question. And here is this interesting insight that we need to reflect on. That is, let us take the case of representation, widening representation, the engendering point that Amita spoke about. Why is it that states are going beyond the 74th Amendment? The 74th Amendment requires only 33% reservation for women. And that's a mandate. But 14 states have gone beyond it and are mandate 50%. So it's a progressive measure, which is going even beyond 74th Amendment requirement. Whereas the base requirements of 74th Amendments, like constituting ward committees and MPCs and all of them, are not being done. So we need to understand what are the incentive systems that cause these certain reforms not to be done, and certain reforms, increasing women's representation is something that I don't think anyone would contest. But in a purely value-based idea, but as a practical idea, it obviously poses a lot of threats to local leaders. Discounting, of course, all the other forms whereby representation can be done. So why does this exist? And I don't know. I mean, so I'm just getting back to the question about, is it the way the reform is done? Now, Amita spent quite a bit of time on looking at JNNURM and its mandates, and 74th Constitutional Amendment and its mandates. The broad question I would like to raise here is our top-down decentralization, mechanisms, where legislatively or in 74th Amendment's case, constitutionally, if you have a top-down measure for democratization and participation and, with all the good ideas, is it because of the very top-down nature of these reforms that they're not done? And I mean, I can't conclusively, many of these questions I'm just raising, and they're open questions. And so the fact that some things are being done and some things are not being done helps us sort of rethink about the nature of reform that we might want to institute. So that, and on the why question, there are more things, but I think I'm running out of time, so I'll just not get into the other why questions. The last bit, let me just speak about the what ought sort of question, what ought to be done, and how can it be done. Now, there is, of course, some, there are various types of, reform proposals that have been doing the rounds. But I think just connecting it back to the last point that I made, the question that we need to go ask is, after now almost 30 years of the 74th, should we start looking at other ways to sort of take the agenda forward? And that is the idea of this new template. I just sort of want to just leave this question about I think even Amita's talk, there was some reference to the uniformity that it brought about. Do we need uniformity? That's one fundamental question. 74th Amendment in some ways brought uniformity. Or do we need to allow, do we need to create systems and processes that allows itself to innovate and come up with new ideas, where different states or different cities might come with their own versions of of reform, and then they might. So if you look at, say, federal constitutions, say in the US, some states have cities which are very powerful. Some states have cities which are medium powerful. Some cities can even have collect income tax. Now there is wide variation. I don't want to take the US case because the context is very different. But the point is, do we go by the 74th Amendment uniformity style, or do we actually rethink and think of some sort of radical decentralization model where different actors, as long as certain ground rules are laid down, different actors can come up with different solutions. So, of course, it's a challenging sort of question to examine, but there are ways in which we could consider when it can be done and when it cannot be done. If we do that, what are the incentive structures that need to be looked into? How it can be done? Learning from how the 33% became 50%. If you have political incentives matching with other incentives. So there are a bunch of questions there, but I'll just leave it there. I've run out of time. So I'll just leave it there because and take forward the discussion, with others. Thank you. Thanks, Amita, for the wonderful talk.
Thanks, Matthew, for some of the interesting insights that you have presented. And just to add to what Matthew has said, another way of looking at this wide relation is to find an answer to this wide question is to look at the state-local relation, because at the end of the day, the implementation of 74th CA is about two distinct parts. One is lawmaking, another is rulemaking, and there are some very interesting works which are coming out, that in many states, these lawmakings are generally under the purview of the legislative wing of the state governments, whereas the rulemaking, they are performed by the state level bureaucrats and through number of, say, administrative orders, circulars, and so on and so forth. And that is true in a typical top-down manner, as Matthew has mentioned, and without taking into account the interest of the local government and their representatives. So it might be another important lever to look at to the why part of that distinct links. Well, so thank you once again, Matthew, and let me now invite Vinay to chip in and share your feedback. It's over to you, Vinay.
Yeah, thanks, Soumyadip. Thanks to IMPRI as well as Amita for laying out broadly almost all the issues regarding the 74th Amendment and the new concerns which are arising. So I think I would actually like to focus on, the issue of how this proximity, proximacy that you talked about. If we are looking at how government is actually, dealing with the pandemic, the local government had the COVID pandemic, the local government had a fairly large role to play, but it was implementing the public health aspects, the series of different government orders. At one count, sometime in 2020, it was something like 7,000 or 9,000 orders, which different local governments, state governments, etc., had been issuing. And I think now, almost another year and a half later, it will be much more. So the point which Soumyadip was also emphasizing about rule making and legislation, how do we envisage in the future, because of the role that is already being played by local governments now, to enhance the role for municipal governments to be involved in legislation. Now, for example, I think in the case of Bangalore, many people will be on this webinar as well, knowing about how the state government actually pushed for, as well as maybe even the local government pushed for getting the corporators the main role in appointing nominating ward committee members. And there was a fairly more open process than there was before such a provision was made. So that is to just start with, but I think we need to counter what is happening in terms of battle of perception versus reality. Now there is a battle of perception that was also dealt with by the local governments in Kerala, in the state of Kerala. I think the only state in India which has the Department of Local Government, both panchayats and urban, together in under one department. Though there are separate, urban affairs and panchayat affairs coordination, sections in the department. But I think what we need to look at is how, building on existing political arrangements, political institutions, political organizations and their work. And here I highlight both the people's planning process as well as the people's resource mapping process. How in 25 years now, or 25 plus years now, dealing with the pandemic, I think you see there's hardly, that organizations like Kudumbashri or the women's employment as well as women's employment creation through COVID pandemic, as well as maybe relief work, support work, supply of resources, various kinds of work was taken up by local governments and as well as Kudumbashri. Now, I think we need to seriously look at how Kerala has played a outlier example role in this. When most state governments would plumb for, like Mathew was saying earlier, uniformity in their approach, Kerala has maintained a very more of an outlier example. So I think there is local democracy to a large extent. There is employment generation. There is contracts for special sections of society, disadvantaged sections of society, for getting work organized. And I think, because it is a local government department, we'll have to look into it very much more closely. So I think, as in the letter and spirit of 74th Amendment, it was the institution of local self-government which was to be established. And if institutions of local self-government have to be at the cost of the role of the powers of state governments, then I think that is also to some extent being carried out in Kerala. And I think we need to analyze to what extent that has actually happened. I don't really, I'm not really aware of this, but how much it has curtailed the powers, but definitely the interference in local affairs, local government affairs is decreased. Now, this is where I would like to actually point about this. The one is the pandemic, of course, but the other one is an epidemic. And the epidemic which we are dealing with currently, and JNNURM and smart cities and other missions are also symptoms of that, is the epidemic of centralization. And we have had this epidemic of centralization, especially emphasized and highlighted during the last during this particular government's regime. So when you go back, when we go back to 30 years, actually let us go back a little further and look at we took the example of America in the case of Mathew, but I would actually like to say where participatory budgeting as well as right to the city comes from, and came from, was the Brazil Constitution in 1988, which actually is a three-tier federal structure. Which, of course, gave rise to excellent examples about right to the city as well as participatory budgeting, both of which came from the workers party themselves, but it got institutionalized and then probably spread all over Brazil to and all over the world, I guess, both in terms of right to the city as well as participatory budgeting. But it was not taken up to that extent. It was something which was slightly distant. It was away from us. What did it actually do? Maybe in panchayats, if you see I think groups like MKSS and others have set up campaigns similar to for putting accountability as well as public hearings and various kinds of mechanisms like social audit, etc., to increase the demand side of participation, to increase the demand side of rural participation to a larger extent, but I hope urban as well. So I think really it is about increasing the demand side and changing perception. If we want a local government, what should that local government be actually doing? And what kind of important functions and important role do we see that local government playing, other than local democracy, consultation, participation? So I think we should look at the example of, I want to quote here Power to the People, which is the topic of which is the title of the book by Professor K.C. Shivaramkrishnan. I think it came out 2003 or 2000 something like that. But it basically lays out the entire process of the 65th Constitution Amendment, which is 1989, August 1989. When it was passed, it had city passenger transport, communication, including roads, bridges, etc., etc., urban electrification, urban housing. Housing, of course, you can see very clearly, without which all these missions are not PMAY or RAY or any other missions earlier, which were centralized, but urban housing. And then I think a couple of others which are very important, like public distribution system. So if you look at the 65th Constitution Amendment, we have 37 different topics, which are now reduced to, in the 12th schedule, they are reduced to 18 topics. And I think we should look at some of them as important to change the perception of what is and what should be, or what role should the local government really have. So, so I think, I don't know if, we can do a comparison, but if this municipal body, municipal local body, urban local body, whatever, has to transform into a local government, it has to have this demand side of what we want a municipality to do. And it should be very clear that this will actually mean that the state government's role will decrease, and it has to. We have to think about that. I don't know. I can. Of course, it's easier said than done. But is it an action point? Is it something towards some? Does it point towards some possible action? I think that is a question. And then when we look at the example right now, the current Chief Minister of Tamilnadu has been for 4 years, the mayor of Chennai, directly elected in 96, 2002, 90, whatever, 4 years or 5 years. Before he became the deputy CM, he's also been the deputy CM for some time. And recently, or just around end of this week or next week, they are going to have the urban local elections in Tamil Nadu. It's going to be something of an experiment to see what can be done in a state like Tamil Nadu, for example, because of this likelihood of change which is going to happen. And I'm just seeing the news that just for discussing the point about the 50% reservation further, about women's reservation, that there might be the news is that, or it may be a rumor yet, but that there may be a Dalit woman mayor for Chennai in the after the election. So the 50% reservation, by the way, is from the 110th Amendment, Constitution 10th Amendment in 2009, which is talking about panchayats. Of course, it is talking about 50% reservation for women in panchayats. But I think based on that, the urban one was also taken up by different states, including Kerala. And then it is now in 14 states, like Amita was saying. So I think, the transformation of representation and reservation is definitely happening. That will have its own impact, maybe in the vision of how the city governments can deal with certain disadvantaged and discriminated sections of society. I hope that happens. And of course, maybe there is scope for working out some good analysis about the 65th Amendment, and maybe pushing for how demand should be created. I think it is all about contestation. It is all about contestation. The centralization has to be strongly contested. And the stronger the contestation comes from maybe states like Tamil Nadu and Kerala, but maybe even in other states, has to be looked at. I think the real thing is about how to save lives, how to save human lives. And does the local government have any role in that? Then it becomes very, very important. Then it becomes very, very crucial. Like, for example, the DC in one of the districts of Maharashtra, he set up these 5 oxygen plants during the second wave of the COVID. I don't know if this was done by any local governments in any part of the country, but he had some money left over from some other purpose, and he repurposed it for these. And so, to some extent, I think the second wave might have a lesser impact in his district, which was drastic in most of the rest of the country. So it's about saving lives. I mean, we have all these huge loss of lives, which is happening both due to climate change, heat waves, cold waves, air pollution. Air pollution is a huge pandemic. I mean, we talk about environmental consciousness, true, but it's like every part of the country is polluted beyond all the standards of WHO. There is no place in the country which is remote enough to come under below the air pollution standards. So if we look at how to change this perception, how to bring about a local government, how to transform this local body into the local government, I think both the 65th Amendment, the Kerala model, as well as maybe to some extent so what is called in Brazil, I think maybe the organic legislation. I don't know whether it is that the municipal body can actually take up. So maybe these are some of the places these are some of the action points that we could look at. I thank you all for this opportunity.
So thank you, thank you, Vinay, for raising some of the broader issues related to the functional domain and the issues related to genuine local autonomy and so on and so forth. So I'm sure Professor Bhide will respond to all the points that our discussions are raising. And let me now move over to Mr. Samir Unhale for your comments.
Yeah, very good evening.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm sorry I couldn't join the meeting early. I had to join late. So thank you for this opportunity, IMPRI. I always find it important to take any opportunity of discussing issues with urban areas with our academician friends, because it always provides us a new perspective and also lead us to some newer understanding. And thank you, IMPRI, for this opportunity of interaction. So I personally feel that the urban phenomena and the cities of today's cities are now getting extremely complex. And I personally feel that most of the academic discourse in maybe urban issues is either of political scientists or of architecture planning. And I think that would be my first missing link, because I will try to view my few points on that other disciplines do not really contribute, to understanding this very complex phenomena especially in Indian cities, when we see the pace is so fast, things are changing so fast, and probably we need to have all the disciplines contributing in its study. It may be engineering, it may be management, it could be psychology, it could be history, it could be even literature. So I think all those fields, all the disciplines need to really come and contribute in understanding and deciphering the phenomena of urban India, in especially the challenges that we would be facing in coming decades. Secondly, I'm just sharing a thought actually, it's not any research or anything, but I always found that the data which is available with the academic fraternity from actually what is happening is fairly less, because the way data is, the way, of course, the office files will always be there, but the data that reaches the research is a bit less. And I sometimes find that it's very often simplistic conclusions out of that limited data, that as a practitioner, I found, as someone who's working in the field for the last 2 decades, always found, whenever I read any research papers on urban or municipal issues, always found that it's a very simplistic sort of inference, or that sometimes I've found it to be sort of template sort of. It's not a judgment on anybody's this thing, but that's my experience. I thought I should be sharing that I found that sometimes the data is very simplistic, sometimes the inferences are very too monocausal or unilinear. So I always felt that what's happening in ground is probably not reaching to our academician friends, which ideally should be conceptualized properly, and so there has to be a loop of information and knowledge sharing. That would lead us to some better understanding. So sometimes I felt prejudice comes in. Sometimes the preset notions are there. Sometimes it's a template reproduction of certain ideas. So that's okay, but probably maybe such exercises of sharing more information, more experiences should enrich the actual data that reaches research and academic, and actually helps both the academic field as well as the conceptualization of the practices. Thirdly, I felt that my first premise was actually I'm not from political science background, so I may not be in a position to speak on that. But and the first point I had made, that we require a multidisciplinary approach for understanding Indian cities. So it might be a bit out of place, but in Indian, in astronomy, that's my another hobby. Currently we are using the multi-wavelength astronomy is what it is called. So when you are studying astronomical phenomena, you also take data from the meter radio waves, from the infrared, from the visible spectrum, from the near ultraviolet, far ultraviolet, gamma rays, and whatever. So, and even now in these days, the gravitational waves, which is a new concept coming into physics. So what we get is that multiple perspectives of a single phenomena adds into the richness of the data. And that's what I feel has to also happen with urban. So maybe when we are studying something, all the disciplines ideally should take part of it. Of course, when we are talking of urban India and so 74th Constitution Amendment is also there. I joined a bit late, so I heard Vinayji speaking on that also. But I somehow feel, that when we interact with the younger councillors or the younger boys, who are now into the high activity of city living, I mean, they always, they are probably born post 85, so they are most post 85 generation. They are more into the newer things. And somehow I felt that the third missing link should be, we need a newer, more contemporary framework, if we could really have that, because although the Constitution Amendment was passed in 94, the ethos was late 80s. That's when the initial deliberations really happened, and there were a lot of, I recollect some big conferences were there in which the Panchayati Raj as well as our councillors interacted. So that's how the current framework is still of late 80s. And maybe the third link in that framework, I think, could be having a more contemporary issues to be reflected, still getting stuck up in, because in urban India of 1980 is different in urban India of 2020. I think that's a reality that we will have to accept, and probably we require some newer concepts also to be brought into the urban issues. Maybe, of course, I mean, that's I've always felt that somehow we cannot, I won't say the word reduce, but we can't reduce citizens only for voting once in 5 years or paying tax once a year. And so for the entire primacy of the political, theory and power and all those things, yes, it is definitely mentioned in the Constitution, it's a part of it. But the current India, young India, wants to just not be constrained by that. And therefore, these aspirations also need to reflect into the any deliberations or discussions that we are taking into. Fifth missing link, another area I think was also mentioned earlier. In a broader framework, I thought from 2005 onwards, India entered into the missions era, so to say, of urban India, in which from JNNURM, we had missions coming up, which later probably branched out into Swachh Bharat, into Hruday, into Amrut Yojana, into Smart City, into maybe, I think, PMAY, and maybe also the National Urban Livelihood Mission. So apparently close to around 6 missions which are working for past 5 to 6 years. So probably when we really look at it, I personally feel that the spirit of cooperative federalism does interplay, in which each level of government is trying to put its pitch to resolve the issues of the problems. Because maybe I call it sometimes the post-colonial stress disorder when you talk of Indian society and Indian economy, that anyway for more than 200 years, the colonial imperial powers took out wealth out of India, and therefore we were left at such a poor stage that all aspects of our social life, were adversely affected, and that's we are now trying to pick up with taking all the helps. So of course the issue of devolution and empowerment, and of course these issues, probably a political scientist would be in a better position to speak about it. But when I see as a practically, when we are experiencing this issue, that we are getting best out of each level, which is coming together in team spirit, maybe cooperative federalism, and resolving the issues of the people, which is also equally important. Because in fact, the news, I think the Swachh Bharat 2.0 is coming, and Amrut 2.0 has also been announced, I think, the last budget. with, I think, the financial allocation, if you look at it, I think it's maybe total allocation. I'm not very sure of the figures, but I won't be surprised if it will be around at least 5 lakh crores of all the missions put together for next 5 years, of course. So this amount of this kind of money coming into the municipal bodies and looking into the practicalities and practical realities of the 4,500 odd citizen towns spread over India, with all the geographical variations and all the socio-economic variations there, making something happen at a go requires cooperative federalism. In that framework, I feel that this as an experiment would be in a better shape to give results to the people finally at the ground, because people at the ground want things to happen, things to improve, things to change. And in that sense, if everybody is coming together, I think there shouldn't be any issues with it. I think the sixth missing link which I felt, of course, is the financial issues, the financial framework that we have. I think a little aspect on the constitutional framework, as we know, is the urban municipalities, if that's the word used in constitution, is very much a state subject. So if a central government has to take part in any issue which is a state subject, it normally does through a centrally sponsored team, which actually now is called as missions. So I think this peculiarity is also a reason why we are seeing many missions are coming up, and probably putting a part to bring out some positive changes at a speed with which we want, because we always said that the essence of mission is speed. We always had programs and projects earlier, but what differentiates them with missions is the ability to make impact in least possible time. As I said, because the time lag of this post-colonial stress disorder that a society in India was. So I think financially issues, of course, the taxes which are available essentially are the state taxes which state delegates to the municipal bodies as per the current framework. Probably the financial strengths, I don't have the exact figures, unfortunately, but of earlier courses which I had done, I recollect reading that the concept I was introduced to was the fiscal imbalance, in which the tax collection by the various levels of government gives that percentage is different, and what is available with the urban local bodies now is very, very small. And therefore, the way GST framework, we had this GST framework with the state and the center are now sharing the taxation powers of all waiving them, and also the council actually, the GST council actually uses that. Maybe as we had also shared it earlier, that the urban local bodies, at least the bigger ones, could be given some share out of that directly when the tax is collected, like in Mumbai, of course, or Chennai, or even the bigger urban local bodies, Calcutta, Hyderabad, Bengaluru, and other. Probably the economic activity is so strong there that the route of money coming through the finance commission or through the other sources, maybe this could really be tried into the way maybe at source they would be getting, because apart from property tax and maybe apart from our water charges, or maybe here in the development charges, as we call it here in Maharashtra, of the real estate development by builders, and the advertisement charges and estate duties which are there, the sources are fairly limited. And the challenges that we are facing, one option could be there. I think our friend also mentioned that some municipalities are elsewhere outside India also collect income taxes. I think, of course, that's a very big issue, because maybe we would require another round of very deep constitutional amendments for that, for the local bodies also to some extent sharing the tax income directly. But probably that time I somehow feel is coming nearer, and maybe we would require some thinking there. Another, I think the seventh missing link which I had in my mind is that taxes cannot be the only source of income for urban local bodies. We have to get out of the traditional concept of handling a city and move towards newer innovations. Those innovations, of course, there will always be a doubt about any innovation. There will always be some mistakes might be there, some shortcomings might be there, but handling the urban India of 2030, 2040, I think just by a traditional concept which emerged 200 years back, I think is going to be a bit out of tune, and we shouldn't hesitate in experimenting. We shouldn't hesitate in innovation and trying out new ideas. Especially, of course, the maybe those who people with finance background normally say that the newer instruments of raising taxes or maybe funds, I won't say it's taxes, but apart from tax and grant, local bodies actually have nothing with them. One force, of course, is there that you have greater tax, you have greater devolution. Of course, that's there. But handling a city just by a municipality is a myth as of now, even as of now. I think we would be putting too much of ideological romanticism into the notions of whatever. But realities are different now. Realities, if you want to handle a city, you require. Too many things are coming in there, and believe me, if you look at the ground realities, we require more and more people, more and more agencies to come together. I don't see this as a zero-sum game. Managing urban India cannot be seen as a zero-sum game. It has to be a variable-sum game where all stakeholders will be coming. That would be the missing link now, and that I believe could be a way forward for what we are looking. And the 8th missing link and the final one, I think I exceeded that because not being into academics, I'm unable to, I'm not very organized probably in my thoughts or maybe delivering them. But the final thought I had in my mind as far as the missing link clue was concerned was that a lot of international cooperation is happening among the cities. And then you of course, there could be various perspectives of that, namely that, there are various city networks coming. There is a lot of international philanthropies or multilaterals or CSRs or all those people coming together and contributing in their way in the managing of the cities. Maybe they have their own priorities, which may not be perceived as the priority of the people here or maybe the political leadership. But I think we are seeing more and more international collaboration which is happening. And I think that's a good thing which is happening. There will be greater things to learn. In fact, I might share experience that during the earlier first year of the pandemic, out of our internal relations or maybe friendship, we had tried to create a framework in which the cities of Latin America, people working in Africa and Asia, maybe from Philippines, Malaysia, India, and of course Latin America, we had Mexico, Brazil and Argentina. Cities from this interacted informally. And the actual mid-level workers, so we interacted the medical officer of Mumbai with maybe medical officer of Mexico or such people. So these interactions really gave us a good insight that a lot of cities have to learn from each other, irrespective of their financial, of their geographical, and of their maybe social conditions. We obviously would be different. So we obviously cannot compare Siberian city with a Saharan city. That's there. But the mid-level functionaries, the people, maybe the junior engineer there, maybe the sanitary inspector there, maybe the other medical doctor, these mid-level functionaries who actually run the municipality. I mean, we tend to focus more on the politicians or the senior bureaucrats like the commissioner or the mayor. Yes, they are important, but the actual city is run by the mid-level people. And this international collaboration which was there, which people really like, they exchange their thoughts, and maybe so the greater missing, also a missing link, not greater, but a missing link which I feel in current urban context is also a greater need for encouraging international collaborations and experience sharing and learning from each other. The international consensus that has emerged and evolved. Maybe, it was Habitat 3 we had in, I think, 2016. Then prior to that, we had the Paris. We talk of SDGs. We talk of the habitats, smart, resilient, sustainable, safe cities. And so this international consensus that is emerging, the interest of the maybe multilaterals and philanthropists into the cities, I think is needs to be properly captured and maybe enabled, and so that the cities and the citizens and the various stakeholders in the cities also are in position to engage with each other and maybe take the levels of interactions and learnings which are there to more better and effective and higher level. So that was, I think, a very limited points I had. So I hope I haven't exceeded my limit, as I couldn't. I'm also sorry for coming up and in and out because couldn't join early. So that's okay. But again, thank you, IMPRI, for the opportunity of sharing thoughts with our friends. It's always important to learn and always important to share the experiences and look for greater such opportunity of interactions. So thank you, sir. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
So thank you, Mr. Unhale. There are many issues which have cropped up, and it's now over to Professor Bhide for your response to all the points which have been raised so far.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Soumya. No, I don't think I'll take much time, but I think Mathew had a very interesting and a very incisive way of even structuring the thoughts around the presentation into the whats and whys and whatever. And I think, yes, identified the core issue well. How do we envisage our local governments? And I do think that is the core which I really try to touch. And I don't think in some ways we are really clear about our templates linked to that. I would perhaps also like to link it to Mr. Unhale's comments on the disciplinary gaps. Okay, so one clarification, Mr. Unhale, that I am not a political scientist at all. In fact, and anyway, but I think the city is all about politics as well, because politics enters a whole lot of different domains. So if decentralization has to do with politics, then my argument would be that it is not about politics alone, but at the same time, you can't deny the political part of it. And also whether the disciplinary gaps exist even within how municipal administration is structured, right? So the IS officer, for example, today is supposed to be an encapsulation of all disciplines, or just knows administration as given perhaps mostly by colonial laws and trying to implement it in rapidly changing context. I mean, that's a question that I think all of us need to engage with as well. In terms of whether top-down decentralization, whether it works, and is that perhaps the real reason for non-implementation, I think is an important question. Though I would feel one should perhaps also compare it with why has it worked to a certain extent, I would say, in rural areas. So perhaps I think doing these kind of back and forth exercises is the critical way in which to perhaps move further. On Vinay, thanks Vinay for several suggestions that you've made. I think I would use the same frame that Mathew has used in terms of what, why. And I think most of Vinay's points are largely to do with what ought to be and how do we do it. And I think the templates that you have suggested about Tamilnadu, about Kerala, about going back and reviewing the 65th constitutional amendment, about also learning from Brazilian cities are interesting. In some ways, they expand the scope of the what. But I do think that the most critical questions are not about the what, but about the what of local government in the future, and how does one even move there, right? Or think about proximity, etc., etc. But thanks for those suggestions, Vinay, as well. I actually don't wish to engage much with what Dr. Samir Unhale talked, because I think like I agree with some of the conclusions that he's talking about, but I don't think some of them pertained with the talk at all, because I think the essence of the talk was actually about what has happened post the 74th Amendment and how do we need to revisit the templates of urban governance. And I definitely would perhaps think that administrative expertise in urban governance is a view that perhaps requires much lesser consideration in the contemporary times, and you need to go beyond it, perhaps, and go beyond a bureaucratic view, I would say, and make it much more as a societal view. Society at large needs to decide on what should be the template of urban government as we move forward. And perhaps I would just stop there.
So thank you, Professor. I'm just saying Professor Mahalaya Chatterjee is here. So if you just want to share any of your thoughts, just quick, maybe.
I could not resist myself.
Yes.
Because of my old friend Amita spoke so well, I could not resist myself. I just raised 2 points, though it was about governing the city. I would raise just 2 points about this 74th Amendment and what can we look at future. I think one of the deficiencies, Amita has also talked, is that the 74th Amendment did not consider the parastatals at all. Though the parastatals started being there from late 50s, they are almost there for 30 years, but somehow while framing this 73rd and both 74th, the framers forgot about parastatals. So we just don't know what they thought about the linking the parastatals with the urban local bodies and what would be there. But that advantage was taken by if you think of that just after the 74th Amendment, the major program was the Jawaharlal Nehru Urban Renewal Mission, and that was again put on the so-called parastatals. They planned, as I also agree with Amita, the consultant age has arrived with the Jawaharlal Nehru Urban Renewal Mission. So the third part of the 74th Amendment, that is urban planning, which was supposed to be done by the urban local bodies, went totally missing. Totally missing. They were nowhere in the picture. All the urban local bodies for this Jawaharlal Nehru Urban Renewal Mission, they are asked to follow what the consultants had to say, and there was no people's voice, nothing. That is one of the big deficiencies. And that takes me to the second point, that is what happened to the planning function, which was designated to the urban local bodies by the 74th Amendment. What happened to the so-called metropolitan planning committees, what happened to the district planning committees. The district planning committees were very unique in the sense that they combined the rural and urban part, and that would lead to a different notion of settlement planning. But nothing happened. Nothing happened. What followed Jawaharlal Nehru Urban Mission, what we are having today, Amrut, Swachh Bharat, etc., etc., everything a so-called consultant give this thing, and the local bodies are given to execute it. That's all. So when Ananya Rai writes why Indians cannot plan their own towns, the only answer is because they are not allowed. They are not allowed. They are just given to follow. And given our structure, the state finance commissions, they are appointed, they give their recommendations, but finally, again, they are left with the begging bowls and others. So this is a big deficiency. And if you look at this, I can say from my experience of West Bengal, after the change of guard, what is happening, that is no effort of municipalization, but wherever possible, a new development authority is being created. It may be in a small religious place called Tarapit. It may be in the birthplace of Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. Wherever you go, you find there is a new development authority. So this is something, if we now rethink about 74th Amendments, its impact on the last 30 years and what would happen, we would have to rethink this part, that what would happen to urban planning. Thank you, and thanks for giving me the chance.
Thank you, Professor Chatterjee. And it's over to Professor Bhide because we are already running late. So if you want to respond to Professor Chatterjee's comment.
No, actually, I don't want to, but I think she has highlighted one of the important gaps, and perhaps also added to the reasons in some ways how we keep on repeating the same mistakes, right? And so again, the observation that it is not being implemented, one is moving very far from it, okay? But we still need to collectively find answers to why, right? And perhaps even thinking about, are our cities, I mean, definitely there is a top-down attempt, therefore maybe it has not worked, but is there any signs, any symptoms of a demand which is bottom-up for decentralization that seems to be rising? Because I think we should also get over these kind of templates of Kerala mein hota hai. I don't think that is also going to serve us in the future with the kind of patterns of urbanization that we are seeing.
So, okay, thank you. And just to take this discussion forward, and since we have a way forward round, so let me just again go back to our panelists for a minute for their final thoughts. So let's start with Mathew.
Yeah, no, I don't want to take too much time. Just a couple of points I think that have come in. One is, I think, as Amita said, we can't just go by models. I think, and this famed Kerala model, I mean, I'm originally from Kerala and all of that, but if you look at, if you look at the recent, publication that has come out by Suraj Jacob and Babu Jacob, a bureaucrat and an academic writing together, which compared Kerala with Tamilnadu and Gujarat, the picture is not very positive actually in terms of urban local governments sort of ability to do things. So and honestly, the question is this? I mean, that top down may not always work is well known, but what are the ways to reimagine? And I do think that my sense is someone who's been looking from a very 74th Amendment centric lens so far. I do think we might need to sort of, I mean, obviously adhere to it, but also think of ideas with, not by purely sort of quoting and restating the same stuff, but how does that emerge? And that is the larger question. What ought to be done? We mostly agree about. We need participation, democracy, all of that, decentralization, subsidiarity, all the principles broadly, I think, in agreement. But how do we do it? And I do think unless there is actual push at a political level, right, that whether you have social movements and political, I mean, Vinay spoke about the Workers' Party in Brazil, who actually came about and allowed that city statute to emerge. Of course, now all of it is being undone by Bolsonaro, right now. But it wasn't something that just, there's Rajiv Gandhi envisioned and it has to be done after his death. It didn't come out of some sort of sympathetic sort of appeal to authority. There was a political push. So I do think unless there is civil society actually engages with politics and pushes it, we will just keep talking the same stuff about, lamenting, as Amita said, lamenting the lack of implementation, and think of ways of engaging actually in politics, and sometimes maybe not even think of big reforms. Think of, little battles of making sure that people's access is met in various ways, and allowing systems and processes that allow that. And I think that's the way to go. I mean, I usually don't want to take a very prescriptive lens, but basically allowing things to happen. I'm not saying this should happen, but creating mechanisms where conversation and processes are, it allows for some of these things to happen. So I will just keep it there and keep it broad. I mean, I don't want to say this is the thing to do. That's it. Thanks.
So thanks, Mathew. So it seems that still these how part is still remain very broad questions of policy, questions for the policymakers. So it's over to the Vinay. If so, your thoughts maybe in a minute or so.
Yeah, so I just want to add a couple of recent examples. Of course, a lot has been discussed already about the Odisha land to the slum dwellers. That they're calling it a mission. They're also dealing with it at the state level, and there are elections coming, of course, a couple of years down the line. But Punjab also, Punjab is already going through elections. So I think we need to really see, this is what I was saying about the perception. In the case of, the example is not well known, but in BBMP, in the city government that we have in Bangalore, the Bangalore government initiated a similar process for having land to the people who live on it in slums, in certain government land. And they announced a government order and a notification was issued, etc., etc. But in this, the epidemic of centralization came in the way. The JNNURM model mission said, we will fund housing, but we will not fund land. The housing model took over the land titles issue. So I think another issue, for example, now again go back to Tamil Nadu, is the, if you look at the social justice sort of forum, multi-state social justice forum that the Tamil Nadu CM has announced. Now, I don't know whether it is actually going to really look at concrete issues regarding social justice, but social justice is one of the topics of the 74th Amendment, social justice as well as economic justice, economic development. So I think we need to really see as a movement like this as coming halfway forward. And does civil society have an adequate response? Does civil society have an appropriate response? And can we do something at either a state level or this multi-state forum, whatever shape it takes? It's in the early stages. Now, last point is on the announcement by the former CM of UP, what is his name, Akhilesh Yadav. In his manifesto yesterday, he has announced an urban employment guarantee in his manifesto. Now, at the state level, I think Kerala already has a mission like this. Is there some support? Is there some workers, collectives or unions or whatever forms of association that can be, taking this as a halfway measure? Of course, the elections are still to happen and we never know what exactly comes at the end of a month. But this is a move now. Political thinking might change. Political thinking at the topmost level might change. And we need to think of this as a change to some extent, maybe some small things to grasp on when we look at social justice, because otherwise there is no real scope where the social justice and economic development is really going to be actually practiced, actually achieved, or actually realized in some cities and some places, urban or rural. I think, the form, if you're looking at the future, the form is definitely going to change, and the flexibility that is required both on the state governments, on the civil society, and as well as the local governments is much more. And maybe that flexibility is possible if the civil society creates this demand. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinay, for your these comments. And it's over to Mr. Unhale. If you are there, if you could please just make some of your observation within a minute. Are you there? No.
Sir is not here, it seems.
Okay, so finally over to you, Professor Bhide, for your final comments, if you want to make any.
Ma'am, please unmute yourself.
Just to wrap it up.
Please unmute yourself. Yeah.
I don't really have any final conclusive comments as that. Okay, but I do think perhaps as IMPRI, as civil society, as academia, as bureaucracies and as a political society as well, we all need to engage with the question of what should be our frame of governing cities and smaller towns, because there is no doubt that urbanization, a different form of urbanization maybe, is where we are coming to, and that our past scripts are not working. So this is a question of a very, very serious public discourse which is required. And I do hope that IMPRI will engage with it in this manner. And there will be much more debates and on the various aspects which are linked to urban governance. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Professor Vidya, and I'm sure that we at IMPRI will be able to take these issues for much greater deliberation and discussion. I'm sorry for not being able to keep my videos on just because of internet issues, and I'm not able to hear all of you properly. So anyway, so I think overall today's discussion provides enough food for thought for rethinking, rather I should say re-envisaging the local governance following the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act and establishing a genuinely empowered city government in India. So once again, on behalf of the Center for CHURS at the IMPRI, I'm thankful to all the participants. I'm thankful to Professor Amita Bhide. I'm thankful to all the other panelists, Dr. Mathew Idiculla, Mr. Vinay Baindur, Mr. Samir Unhale, Professor Maharashtra Chatterjee, and all the participants who have joined this particular city conversation series, and also who have joined, who are watching this particular city conversation series live on Facebook and other online platforms. And also we hope to have your presence in our future city conversation series as well. So once again, thank you very much for attending this particular city conversation series. We look forward to your presence in near future as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks to all the discussants. Thank you, Dr. Arjun, Dr. Soumyadip.
Thank you.
And all.
Thank you for giving me the chance.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you. Good night.
Thanks.